Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and it's October. Summer is in the rearview mirror, and it's time to start getting both fired up and in shape for the snow. The best way to get fired up is going to see a movie premiere. While watching movies at home is fun, nothing compares to seeing all the action on the big screen. So my recommendation to you is to see a ski or a snowboard movie at a premiere the way the filmmakers want you to see it. You won't be disappointed. What will disappoint you is starting off your season out of shape. I mean, tickets and passes aren't cheap. So to make the most out of your early season, think about it now and get in shape. And there's no easier way to get in shape, like real ski and snowboard shape where your legs aren't screaming at you after a few runs, than to use Rollerblade's award-winning Skate to Ski app that you can download over in the App Store. This program is proven to work. There's no better way to get in ski or snowboard shape. And once you download it and use it, you can thank me after you crush your first few days on the mountain by emailing me at mike@thepowellmovement.com. You can tell me about those first few days, or you can just give me any questions or concerns that you have, and I will get back to you. So that's how you get in shape for the season. That's how you get in touch with me. And now it's time to talk about a guy who's definitely going to be in shape for ski season because he's a badass athlete and he's my guest this week. I'm talking about Drew Peterson. He's not only a pro skier for Salomon, but he's also a pro runner who just placed 59th in the Leadville 100, which is an insane accomplishment. If you know about that one. Drew's story is so much more than running, though. In fact, we don't talk about running at all because I'm not a fan of running. I only run when I'm chased. But for Drew, running and skiing, it's kind of emotional therapy for him. And he's needed it. Drew's a guy that lives with a ton of highs and lows, and it took him a long time to get some help and manage his mental conditions. So in this podcast, we're going to talk about his life and times, we're going to talk about his skiing, his battle with his mentals, the injury that drove him to get help, and a lot more. It's real and it's heavy, and that's all I'm going to say about Drew in this intro. I don't want to spoil the podcast at all. At this point, I do want to thank Honest Jerry from Die Cut Stickers. He came over for a barbecue even though he's vegan, and he brought me some new Powell Movement stickers. So thanks, Jer, and everyone at Die Cut Stickers. If you need stickers, I believe my code over there for 15% off still works, and that code is DCS15. Now I want to ask you to do a few things for me that I ask a lot. The first is for you to tell a friend about the show. It does really help things grow. The second is please post on social media if you like an episode. I ask all the time for this. I believe it's happened twice in the past year, and there are at least 8,000 of you listening depending on the week. I don't beg for money through a Patreon. I don't try and sell you a ton of stuff. I only ask for little things like this. So please help me out and post on social media to help this podcast grow. Finally, I need to thank my amazing sponsors. And as I mentioned last week, this is the start of the 2-week window to get your 25% off your outdoor research gear. And I have all the details for that in their ad. And I also want to thank the rest of my sponsors as they are the best. They are GoPro, Stanley, Elon Skis, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, it's time to talk with Drew Peterson. Right off the bat, I'm going to jump into the idea that you have a condition that a lot of people have, and it's manageable if you do the right things. But if you don't, it can cause a lot of pain. You have skin that was built for sunblock. Can you describe your worst sunburn?
That is not where I thought you were going.
I know, I did that on purpose.
Well played. Worst sunburn was probably inside my nose, but most skiers know that pain from skiing on the glaciers in the spring.
Yeah, but I met you at Palisades Tahoe for the McConkey event, and I looked at you, you had a lot of sunblock on, and you looked like one of those guys that can get a terrible sunburn. Would that be accurate?
Oh, very much so. If anybody needs sunscreen, I'm the guy to have in your ski crew. I've always got some on me.
Okay. And physical pain is something that you've proven that you can manage. And over the years, mental pain is something that's had its hooks in you your whole life. And while this podcast is going to be about how you got to where you are in a different way than most people, we're also going to talk about mental health throughout. So I'm going to prep you with that. But before we get into your life and times of being a pro athlete, you are on the road traveling as a desk jockey, it seems like. You're the guy who's the point man for Salomon's Quality Ski Time film tour. And it's not often that an athlete takes a role like this. How did this even happen?
Yeah, right now I definitely do feel like a desk jockey. This is like my crazy work season. So kind of full on right now, but it's fun and exciting. And I was thinking just the other day that this is kind of the dream job that I would have dreamt up when I was a kid, beyond just being a pro skier. So it's cool to have made it for myself. So last year, Solomon and I started the Quality Ski Time Film Tour together. We were both kind of working on a concept. I went to them and said, I want to make a big film tour. And they were like, oh, well, we were already talking about having some showings and premieres at ski shops. And my vision was to create something bigger, to create something more in that traditional ski movie premiere sense, ski movie tour like Warren Miller or TGR, and take our films on the road and go to big theaters. And that's exactly what we did. So last year was the first year of it. And last year I jumped in like way off the deep end and took on the majority of the responsibility and the financial liability, which was really terrifying. And I was just booking 500-person theaters on my credit card and just hoping that it would all work out. But I knew that it would. And I'm really glad that we followed through, because last year we were able to have an awesome tour with 13 shows across North America. And this year we are back for year 2 with 18 shows. We're growing it both in size and geographically. And the coolest part about it, far beyond just the work that I've been putting in and growing it to where it is now, is that it's the greatest opportunity to connect with people in person, especially in this day and age. I think we have so much digital communication and so much connection online, but that connection personally often leaves me feeling really empty. So that's why I wanted to get face to face with fans and enthusiasts of skiing. And it's everything that I hoped for. It's a lot of fun.
And is Solomon going to be the backstop for the financial part of it this year? Do you not have to put your credit card down on these theaters and hope that you make your money back?
Yeah. So this year we shifted things a little bit, and Solomon and I partnered a little bit closer on it this year. Solomon came on to do a lot more work, and that is so helpful. So yeah, fortunately the financial liabilities on them this year.
And is it like a job for you? Is there a retainer and a decent budget that you're working with for Solomon, or is it just kind of rolled into your athlete gig? This is just something else Drew's going to bring to the table.
This is separate from my athlete contract. And, just like from a business perspective, I'm diligent to differentiate that. Last year, they came on as a financial supporter, and then I ran everything through myself through an LLC. But this year, I make my money off of ticket sales. So if people are out there and they're like, why does Solomon have to charge a ticket? It's because I'm putting in months and months and months of full-time work on this, and I have to make money. But we also split ticket sales with Protect Our Winners. So it's not all just going to my pocket. It's just enough to justify my time.
For everybody listening, when this tour comes to your town, because it's coming to 18 different places, when you buy a ticket, half of it's going to Protect Our Winners. It's going to make a difference in the world. And then half of it's going to Drew, and it's going to make a difference to his season. And he's putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So we should all support it because it's going to be a fun event all around. But when you manage a tour like this, it seems like there can be a little bit of stress. Things aren't always going to go right. There are really late nights. There's the constant travel. There's shitty meals. And you're an athlete. Does it make it incredibly hard for you to get in shape for ski season when you're just traveling around?
A little bit. The stress is the hardest part health-wise. Last year, I literally lost hair. So it was part of why I went to Solomon. I was like, yo, I need more help this year. I was losing hair. So my hairline's back, feeling good this year. But yeah, just got to try to prioritize, still making sure that I'm training and getting ready for winter too. And fortunately, like with my style of skiing, like ski season doesn't really pick up for me until like January at the earliest.
Yep.
So just go in with a gradual approach to the start of winter. And especially as I've grown up, I just have learned that longevity mindset, not just in the big picture, but every year. So making sure that I'm focused on longevity for the whole season, not just like being balls to the wall when I start skiing. And kind of the funny thing is like trail running and ultra running are my summer passions. And so I actually slimmed down a little bit in the summer, and I need to pack on some muscle in the fall. So like not having as much time for endurance training means that my ratio goes way more to strength work, because that's what I can get in when I'm on the road. And that's what I need to get ready for winter. So it all works out pretty well.
Nice. Well, before we can get into talking about skiing, we have to talk about your life and times. And you grew up in the shadows of the famous outlets at Silverthorne. Was it strange living in a part of the mountains known for its massive retail footprint?
Man, you're nailing these questions so far. First off, shout out, my favorite store at the outlets is the Crocs outlet. You might see me this fall on the film tour rocking my dress Crocs, which is the pair that I'm trying to keep clean.
Okay.
But yeah, Silverthorne's an awesome place to grow up. It's kind of like a town that I think most people pass through when they're on their ski vacation. And, you know, like most mountain towns, there really is a strong community that actually lives there. And that's the community that I was fortunate enough to grow up in.
And it's like your brother, yourself, mom and dad growing up. Are your family members ski bums as well? And is that why you were in Silverthorne?
Oh, yeah, that's the reason. Both my parents are from Michigan, and they moved out west. And they moved here to Colorado. They moved to Frisco in 1983 to chase a life that was built entirely around skiing. So that's how we ended up here, and that's why they prioritized being here to raise me and my brother.
So you were born to do this. And when your parents move out to be ski bums, I'm guessing that they're not going to have the Wall Street type jobs pulling in 7 figures, but what the fuck do I know? Was it rich, poor, or average growing up?
I'd say average. When they moved out here, it was definitely just like that classic ski bum mentality. Of course, back then, it was easier to make the dots connect with that ski bum mentality. So like my mom was selling tickets at Copper, my dad was teaching skiing at Copper, and then as life went on, things progressed a little bit for them. And my dad started selling real estate. Really good thing to get into in a growing ski town. Yep. So that's why it turned into average, not just ski bum life.
And do they get you out early and often when you're a kid? Are you like that backpack kid going skiing at like 1 and 2?
Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, I started skiing, I guess, when I was like 1.5, like pretty much, you know, when I could stand on my own, put me on plastic skis in the driveway. And then my brother's 2 years older than me, so he had to learn how to ski first. And when my brother was learning how to ski, I was in my dad's backpack. And then, of course, I don't remember this firsthand, but infamous story that my parents love to tell me is that one time when we were skiing and my dad had my brother on the leash and me in the backpack, I started kicking him in the back and I was like, me ski, me ski, me ski. And that was when my dad was like, okay, yeah, Grant's probably good enough to ski on his own. And that's when I got on skis myself.
Nice. And your ski upbringing isn't like most other skiers. I mean, I don't think you're really put into a program right away. It's more your instructors, your dad, your brother, in the mountains. And growing up, going out into the backcountry with your dad, do you learn a lot of snow safety and decision-making from him?
No, not really. My dad still loves riding chairlifts, honestly. But just being on skis that early and growing up in the mountains, like the mountains were my teacher in that regard. But I was really fortunate that I was able to start skiing in the backcountry pretty young. Like really when I was in high school was when I was getting into it.
That's way younger than most people. And at this point, I'm going to reference your really heavy movie, Ups and Downs, a bunch in this podcast. In the movie, when you talk about childhood, you mention that you're moody, that you have tantrums, and you're an emotional kid. And looking back, what did a tantrum look like when you threw one? And have you figured out why they happened yet?
Oh, man. Yeah, as a kid, definitely just like scream and cry a lot and storm off and run outside.
Just like something doesn't go your way?
Yeah.
And then you just sprint out of the room and you're like inconsolable?
Yeah, I'd get really angry. That was usually like the easiest emotion to channel that into. And, you know, I think like I say it in Ups and Downs too in the film. Like back then, everybody thought like, he's just a kid. And to some degree, maybe that's true. But in hindsight, like it definitely all makes sense. Like why it was so hard for me to process my emotions and why everything was just always at the ends of the spectrum and really extreme for me.
Yeah, I mean, did your brother exhibit behavior like that too, or was it unique to you?
No, my brother's pretty chill. He always has been. Yeah, my brother's always been really mellow and really like conscious and considerate. And I'd like to think that I've grown into some of those qualities. But yeah, we've definitely been different from the beginning in a lot of ways.
So when your folks see you have a tantrum and they have to react because, you know, I've got a kid and if my kid had a tantrum, I would have to kind of settle him down and calm him down and do whatever I could, soothe him to get him back into whatever we were doing. What did your parents do to try to calm you back then? Did they have any kind of strategies for that?
So I got to be completely honest here. And ironically, I guess in a way it does connect to Ups and Downs, is I have like pretty vague memories of a lot of my childhood from concussions.
Yes.
Not just from the concussions that we referenced in the film when I was an adult, but when I was younger too. So I don't have like the clearest memories from that point in time, so I don't really have a good answer for you there.
Okay. But that makes me talk about concussions a lot earlier than I was going to talk about them, so I'm going to talk about them right at the end. But you mentioned it. You had a lot of them when you were young. You had a couple that we're going to talk about later. But the big thing that we're talking about in the world today, especially when you look at like football players, is CTE. And that's a serious thing that's definitely happening. Is that something that scares you now when you know that you've had these concussions, you've had like post-concussion syndrome, and it's almost like you're waiting like a ticking time bomb? And I don't mean to say it like that. Sorry.
No, you're all good. You're not going to offend me in this interview. And if you do, I'll call you out.
Okay.
No, so there's a piece of me that worries about CTE. There's a piece of me that worries about the correlation between concussions and dementia. There's definitely those worries. I have had a lot of concussions. I've had a couple really severe ones. You know, for me, I'm in acceptance with what has happened in my life. And all I can do right now is live the healthiest life that I possibly can and set myself up for success in that regard. So that's what I focus on now. And I've had these conversations with my neurologist too. And he's helped me understand a lot of the differences between skiers like me and football players who are being, after death, football players are being diagnosed with CTE. And I've talked about this with my neurologist because he's also a consultant for the NFL Players Association. And the difference is that NFL players have repetitive concussions over their entire career, like starting all the way back in middle school. If you're an offensive lineman, you're getting a minor concussion every time you're knocking heads with somebody. So that adds up to be thousands of concussions. And for somebody like me, while I'm not positive the exact number of diagnosable brain injuries that I've had, like mine is more, I don't know, a dozen or so. I've had like probably 4 really severe ones that come to mind, 5 maybe. But those are hits of 20 G's to my brain or something. So they're really big,
right,
or 30 G's. But it's a lot different than getting 3, 4, 5,000 10G hits over time.
Gotcha. I'm going to go back to the movie, and you reference one thing there. You say skiing gave you emotional control. And does that mean that you're so focused on skiing that you almost have blinders on when you go skiing and all your problems kind of fade away? And that's like the therapy of skiing? Is that kind of what you're referencing there?
That is accurate to some degree, especially in my life up till this point. But that's actually not what I'm referencing in the film, because when we made that film, that 19-minute film comes from 6 hours of interview footage.
Oh, wow.
So like that actual sentence is taken a little bit out of context, but it's cool to, you know, get to expand on it in an interview like this. And it's to a degree a perfect time to talk about it, because I came to that realization actually in the first appointment I ever had with my neurologist. It was seriously one of the most important days of my life. It really changed the course of my life to meet my neurologist. And my first appointment with him, we sat down in this basically like conference room with him and his athletic trainer. And we spent 3 hours going through my concussion history, my mood history, like literally all the way from back when I was a little kid. And we drew out line graphs on a big whiteboard and tried to correlate and figure out causation of different dips and really bad years of my life. And then we put on top physical and orthopedic injuries and tried to make sense of a lot of the track that I'd been on.
Like putting the timeline of injury and mental illness all together?
Yeah, exactly. And literally through drawing line graphs on a whiteboard together. It was a really awesome opportunity to get to unpack it in that way and then connect it to a clinical sense. And, you know, we talked all the way back to when I was a kid, and he made me see. I'm not sure I'll nail exactly how he worded it, but yeah, as a kid, skiing gave me this emotional control that I couldn't find elsewhere in life, because while so much of my life was turmoil and confusing and these high highs and low lows, like skiing, especially when I'd ski fast, especially when I would take risks, when I jump off of something, like there were a bunch of positive chemicals in my brain, and I was in control of my emotion, albeit through a physical external modality, but I was in control, and I wasn't able to find that elsewhere in life. So chemically, neurologically, that is probably a big reason why I latched on to skiing and built so much of my life around it, beyond just growing up on skis and growing up in a ski town.
I mean, is it like the skier's high, like the runner's high as well? Just dopamine being released when you're experiencing those feelings and that's how you're controlling it?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you asked that because I really want to, I don't know the steps, but I really want to do some clinical research on what's happening chemically in my brain and other people's brains, because I think that in skiing or other gravity sports or extreme sports, we often just gravitate to calling it an adrenaline rush, but there's a lot of other chemicals at play in your brain.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out by giving you a 25% off code to the best outerwear on the planet. I'm talking about Seattle's Outdoor Research. OR has always been known as the outerwear brand that makes things of the absolute highest quality. From rain jackets for the city slickers to the stuff mountaineers can trust in the highest peaks in the world. OR has always delivered. But now, their fits and styles have changed. While they still make the best-in-class product for mountaineers, they also have everything for the resort skier or snowboarder or that kid that wants to hit the park. And they make a lot more than just that. So to get 25% off your Outdoor Research order, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and go shopping. When you check out, enter the code POWEL25, that's all caps, no spaces, and the number 25 when you check out, and you'll get that discount. I should also note that this code is valid for 25% off non-sale items only and not valid on OR Pro styles. Next up, it's the award-winning Elan ski brand. I've been telling you how amazing my ripsticks are and how the whole Elan collection will make you a better skier, but don't just take my word for it. In the Free Skier magazine test, Elan dominated in the most important categories. One of my favorite skis, the Ripstick 96, was the best in class #1 in the men's 96 to 99 category. So if you're looking for a ski that's a daily driver that will do everything, Free Skier magazine and their elite testers say that Elan is the best, period. The Ripsticks 106 placed in the top 5 for the 106 to 109 category. And for true powder skis, the Ripstick 116 took second place. So if you trust the ski tests, Elan is your choice. And if you trust me, Elan is your choice. And if you care about the planet, Elan should be your choice, as they have built their own solar plant that powers their factory, and since July, their factory is run on 100% renewable energy sources. Elan is arguably the most responsible supplier in all of snow, and they're always good times. To find out more about Elan and their factory, head on over to elanskis.com. And last but not least, it's time to talk about the only action sports camera that matters, GoPro. And they have just launched their new camera, the Hero 11 Black. Now, if you like getting clips of your skiing, snowboarding, skating, or just your family on vacation or anything really, if you aren't using a GoPro, you are blowing it. There are quite a few reasons that GoPro makes the best action sports camera out there. You know, sleek, functional design, the best in technology, and the Hero 11 has some new features that raise the bar even higher. Think an 8x7 aspect ratio image sensor, the Emmy Award-winning Hypersmooth 5.0 with auto lock that makes shaky footage a thing of the past, a long-lasting Enduro cold weather battery made with my snow users in mind, 27 megapixel photos, and you can even get a 24.7 megapixel video frame grab. So pulling straight from video, a high-resolution image that you can use anywhere. Combine that with being waterproof up to 33 feet, more mounting options than ever before, and you have the best camera ever made. And here's a pro tip. You're going to save $150 when you bundle the GoPro Hero 11 Black with a GoPro subscription exclusively at GoPro.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. We're going to take it back to when you were a kid. And when do you realize that you weren't happy all the time in life? I mean, nobody's happy all the time in life. But when do you realize that you have something going on inside your head that could be depression, but you probably don't even have words for it then, but you're just not happy? When does that show up for you?
Yeah, it's kind of like a challenging question and kind of a challenging time period to really nail down and map out my life. Because back then, I didn't have the language, awareness, or understanding of any of this stuff to be able to, put a pin on it or to explain it.
Sure.
So the earliest memory that I have of suicidal thoughts is from when I was 9 or 10 years old. It happened in 4th or 5th grade. That's why I'm not sure if it was when I was 9 or 10. And honestly, I'm still trying to unpack those memories from all the way back then when I was in elementary school. That is when my memories of suicidal thoughts begin. And with that information, I know that I was struggling for a really long time, certainly before and after that. And yeah, I mean, for me, I hid all of this from the rest of the world. I hid it from my friends and from my family.
So do you try to appear stoked on the outside and be just like outspoken and fun guy, and then really you're going home and like crying and being upset?
So I guess like there's a whole span there. Like when I was younger, I think that I channeled a lot of that discomfort and a lot of like the unknown of feeling like I was the only one thinking these things and like struggling with some of these thoughts. I channeled a lot of that energy into my academics and into my athletics. So school and skiing. And that's like how I channeled that energy. And I don't think that it was like go home and like cry and be sad and depressed. It was more just like I was really intense and very, very emotional, whether it be at school or at home. And, you know, that intensity carried over, like I said, into sports and school.
So what happens when you fail a test?
Failing a test would annihilate me, but I don't think I ever failed a test. But like getting a B on a test would be really upsetting.
But you're able to make sure that you are doing well in school and doing well skiing. I mean, do you use that as self-confidence too? Like, since you're doing so well in school, since you're doing so well in skiing, that you have this self-confidence that outwardly you can show, and then when you get home, you can kind of hide it and get back to being who you really are?
Yes, 100%. By channeling things into school and skiing and doing well in both of those, like that gave me an external confidence. But it wasn't like I let that down ever. Like, you know, every waking moment was trying to create this external confidence through the intensity of my pursuits. And that carried over as I grew up through my teenage years into my adult life and all the way to some degree still today, even though I've been doing work on myself.
So it's almost like you're living a lie back then. And are you living a lie to your brother and your parents too? Are you coming out as like super confident and outgoing and everything, even though you've got these issues that they might not know about?
I want to like stop you for one thing there. Like, it's not living a lie. All of that side of me was still true. Like, I was still excelling in my pursuits, and that was a level of confidence, but it wasn't a deep level of confidence, and it was more external. As far as like family life, I think that they definitely saw a lot of me struggling. I was really lonely as a kid, just really struggled making friends. And I think that was like more the embodiment of what was going on.
Okay. So there was never someone close enough really that you could share all your thoughts and emotions with. It was kind of like you on an island and then you had your family as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then to totally flip the script here, ski-wise, you grew up close to the best terrain parks of the time at a time when going to the terrain park was really important in skiing, it seemed like. Did you ever mess with park skiing, or were you all focused on the backcountry and ski touring from the time you were young?
I had interest in park skiing, but like never really gravitated to it that much. Definitely skied park a little bit growing up. But like for me, the most fun that I had on skis was just ripping around all over the mountain and really fast. So like it wasn't that I just like started focusing on like skiing in the backcountry and ski touring. It was more like chasing around my brother and his older friends. And the other benefit of growing up here is like Summit County, Colorado is definitely a mecca for park skiing.
Yeah.
And back then was like the golden era around here. So that all was going on, but like simultaneously, like my home mountain is Arapahoe Basin, and A Basin has some phenomenal terrain.
Yeah.
And that is where I was having the most fun, was just skiing steep north facing terrain at A Basin. And that's just what I kept doing and kept having fun with it. And I guess I kept getting better at it.
And one thing I find that's interesting around this time is your family gets you your own insurance policy. I've never heard about this before, but do your folks know you're going to get wrecked throughout your career or your ski time and they don't want you raising their premiums or something?
Yeah, pretty much. Man, you do your research. That's funny that you were able to find that. Yeah, I had my own insurance policy pretty early on, like especially good emergency room coverage.
Yeah, I would think that pays for itself many times over when you think about the things that you've done in your career. And we're not going to talk about the major injury of your career, but I read a little bit about another bad injury in Telluride, but I couldn't find all the details. Can you give me a short summary of that one?
Yeah, actually, let me give you one story that you might just get a kick out of first, too.
Okay, I'd love it.
like my parents saw that I was going to need my own health insurance policy. But then also, like, when we were born, they did the classic thing where, they opened a college savings account, like literally the year that we're born. And my brother's was labeled his college savings account, and mine was labeled my post-high school account. Like, even back then, I just like thought maybe he's going to be a little different. I did go to school, and we can get into that if you want.
We'll brush over it, but that's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah. But you asked about the accident in Telluride?
Yeah.
Yeah. The accident in Telluride, I think, was actually like a really important moment in my life and moment in my story. But like, my story has so many different elements. So thanks for asking about it. This was in January 2019, I believe.
Oh, wow. So this is like the most recent big injury.
Yeah. Do you want to get into this, or do you want to wait till we're like to that point in my life and career?
I already asked you it, and I'm not going to go back and change the whole podcast. So let's talk about this one, because then we're going to spend more time on the next one. But this is important to your story, so we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. So Telluride, January 2019, I was on a trip with Solomon. This is actually like kind of an important piece of the story, is that it was this social media trip. And that was like right when Instagram stories were like really popular, and when they like started putting polls on Instagram stories, so you could choose an A or B. So we went on this trip where we would post on the Solomon Free Ski account and be like, should we go skiing in Telluride or Crested Butte? And then everyone would vote, and we'd just go wherever everybody told us to go. And we use that, for other stuff, like which bar should we go operate at and all this stuff. But it was the first day on skis of that trip. We were in Telluride, and it was just this awkward little crash in like a pretty minor terrain feature. But it was interesting because it was just this like micro, like tiny little straight line that definitely would give me no pause whatsoever. But I remember my eye like fluttering, which was happening at that point in time that winter, and my like right eye would get kind of glossy. It was like I was looking through like a Krispy Kreme glazed donut.
Okay.
And it happened right when I was going in, and then my ski tip hit this rock and pinged off that rock, and then that sent me pretty much like headfirst into a rock wall, and I ping-ponged off some rocks, primarily on my head. It was really like small crash, but it was actually really consequential how it went down. And, I mentioned how I think it happened was that like eye thing, and having that kind of mess up me judging where my ski tip was.
Yep.
I mentioned that because later on I found out that was an after effect from my prior concussion, which we'll get into, I'm sure. That was a visual deficit. So in the crash in Telluride, I am not sure if I got knocked out, but like now in hindsight, if you're not sure if you got knocked out, it probably means you got knocked out.
Right.
So I think I was probably knocked out in that one. And like it smashed in my helmet and my goggle frame, and smashed the goggle lens and tore it out, and had some cuts on my forehead. And then I broke the middle finger in my right hand, tore a ligament in the thumb in my left hand. I had these huge lacerations, I guess, in both of my thighs, and massive bruises on both of my femurs.
Oh.
And yeah, I've never like shared publicly all of that stuff, because I think what's important in the story is that I like really didn't want anybody to think that anything was wrong, and I wanted everybody to think that I was okay. So I tried to keep going, and I took the next day off skis, which was the only good decision that I made that whole trip. And otherwise, I just got back on skis and pretended that everything was fine.
Man, it's so crazy how the thought process is like that, even though you know that you shouldn't be doing that. But in your position, a lot of people would go right back out there and ski, because you know what? You want to be a pro skier. You're on this trip. You have this opportunity. And even though you know better, you don't know better, unfortunately. But that's a shame that happened. And we're going to talk about the other injury that created the eye issue. But we got way ahead of ourselves. So now we're going to go back to a faction, because you are a young go-getter kid where you really try really hard in school. And I'm sure when you decide that you want to go after sponsors, you're going to try really hard in that as well. You're going to put together sponsor me videos. And the company that you end up getting signed with, I think at like 15 years old, is Faction Skis. How did you make that whole thing happen?
Yeah, I was one of, I think, the first three athletes that Faction signed in North America. Yeah, when I was 15, it was right before my 16th birthday. That came about through the prior winter. I went to my first competition ever, first big mountain comp, the US Extremes in Crested Butte. That was my first comp ever. I went into it really green. And that was also, this is kind of a cool element to that story. That was also when Powder Magazine's The Draft came out for the first time. It was an article about the top 20 skiers 18 and under in the world.
Yep.
We were like literally reading that magazine on the way down to the Crested Butte comp, and Leo Ahrens and Johnny Collinson were in it. So me and my buddies are like, oh my God, dude, these guys are on the start list for Crested Butte. This is going to be so cool to watch them ski. And it was, not talking shit on them, but I ended up beating them. And
nice.
I was like, oh, damn, like maybe I am pretty good at this whole thing. And one of the judges at that comp was a guy named Rex Weirman, who is a bit of a legend in the old extreme free skiing world.
For sure.
And he's from Summit County. So like he used to rip around a basin with his Go Fast energy drink helmet on. Yeah. So then he was judging and he made the connection and was like, hey, I'm starting to work for Faction. He was their only employee in North America. And so me and my best friend from growing up both got on Faction right then.
And Faction's an interesting company because I believe it was a bunch of venture capitalist money that started the brand. They brought in Candide and a bunch of people. They're still going and they put together an amazing program over the years. But when you're a young go-getter and you get on Faction, is it one of those things where you're kind of an overachiever and you're in constant contact with them and you're staying super involved and trying to take advantage of every opportunity available?
You nailed it. That's me.
You should be like that, especially when you're that young because they know you're hungry. And aside from sponsor opportunities, you're a big mountain contest guy and you need to travel. When do you start road tripping to contests all over the Mountain West area? Was that first year with Faction or that first Extremes?
Sort of. That first year was when I was 15 and it was like, I grew up in a ski town and in Summit County, we have this thing called RSN, Resort Sports Network or something. This just like garbage local TV station, but they just played on repeat these big mountain comps on what was at the time the Subaru Free Skiing World Tour. And I would watch those things over and over. And then Crested Butte was the first time that I got to go to one of the comps. So that winter, I went to Crested Butte, super green. I got second there. And then the next comp I went to was the Solomon Extreme Freeride Championships in Taos, and I won that one. And then the following year was when I started competing more and went on what was at that time called the Junior Free Skiing Tour, which is now like the IFSA. I don't know what they call it, but like all the IFSA junior comps, that was the precursor to all that. So yeah, when I was 16, started bouncing around a bunch and yeah, things really just started growing and taking off from there. And, you know, at the time I was chasing sponsors a bunch and, you know, like you called out, like I was definitely super eager, overachiever, and went out and got some sponsors to help make the dots connect and make it all a little more possible. And these dreams of being a pro skier that I had ever since I was a little kid seemed a little unattainable, you know, like through middle school and early high school. And then things just started clicking and things started going my way. And yeah, that's when I started traveling around a bunch and having some success on the comp circuit.
Yeah, and I would think that 2012 is really the first big breakout year for you. The first highlight I'm going to touch on is we were talking about the draft in Powder Magazine, but in 2012, Powder Magazine has their top 20 skiers, 18 and under, and you are number 8 on that list. And when a magazine with the street cred of Powder is backing you like that, that has to be a huge, like, I've made it or I'm going to make it moment for you. When you get that kind of recognition, what does that do to your mental state? Does it prop you up and put you at an extreme high, or where are you then?
I'd like to think that it didn't make me like too overconfident in myself or anything like that, but it was a big vote of confidence.
It's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good, man. Like, I grew up just the hugest fan of skiing, and I was going to check the P.O. box twice a day, every day growing up. Like, anytime we were driving through Frisco, I'd be like, yo, Mom, can we stop at the post office? I want to see if Powder Magazine's there. So, yeah, I really did grow up on it. So landing in those pages was a big moment for me. But, you know, like, especially to connect it to some of the other things that we've been talking about in this conversation, it was kind of funny because in the rest of my life, my school life, I think that I was seen as this like total nerd. So like in school, I was like really known for my academics. And what people knew about me at school, ski wise, was that I skipped a lot of school to go skiing. That's kind of all they really knew. So I don't think that many people knew the success that I was starting to have in skiing while I was in high school or like when it was starting to ramp up.
In the mini interview that you had in that powder thing, you had cited Lance Armstrong's It's Not About the Bike as your favorite book. Were you one of those huge Lance supporters back then?
Oh, I was a total fanatic. Yeah, I watched the Tour de France every single day and like memorized all the stats and everything. And I must have read It's Not About the Bike cover to cover like 4 or 5 times as a young kid. So yeah, he was like my hero at that point in my life.
When you find out the real Lance and you find out that he screwed over just about everybody he knows and he cheated and he did all that shit, were you just crushed?
Yeah, I guess I was like kind of crushed back then and lost a ton of respect for him. But at the same time, he's a public figure and I had no actual connection to him other than being a fan. And for me, the benefit that I got from my life out of the inspiration that he held through beating cancer and winning 7 tours, even though I later found out it was tainted, was a big inspiration for me. And my mom fought breast cancer and survived when I was in high school. And leaning on that inspiration from Lance was a big deal then for me. So still grateful to him for that.
Now it's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Peter Glenn has been getting people out on the mountain for over 70 years, and they are known for their best-in-class service, both in-store and online. Peter Glenn isn't a giant retailer trying to take over the industry. They're the same mom-and-pop shop that has cared about you and your family having the best experience on the hill as possible. The staff knows what they are talking about, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50. They will match any reputable dealer's price online or in-store, and the return policy is easy, because the last thing Peter Glenn wants to do is make your shopping experience a hassle. So the next time you're buying gear, please check out the retailer that supports this podcast and the history of these sports by heading on over to peterglenn.com. Next up is Stanley, and you know them as the brand that invented the category of keeping your drinks hot or cold. You know, Stanley's the brand with that iconic green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle along with so many other products. Think food storage, coolers and jugs, camp cookware. They have something for everyone's adventure, and it's not overpriced like the competition. Stanley takes pride in delivering what it always has, the best in quality at a fair price. And anyone who's used the product will tell you, nothing comes close to a Stanley. And for listening to this podcast, Stanley is going to give you the best discount you'll find anywhere. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you will get 30% off your entire order. If you spend over $75, I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. Since 2006, 10 Barrel has been brewing the country's best beers, and they don't stop with just beer. Between their cocktails in a can that feature real hard A and they pack a punch, their clean line seltzers, which I've been drinking a ton lately, and their Profuse Juice IPA and Pilsner, which are my go-tos when it comes to their beers, I can't get enough 10 Barrel. And I know they have some flavors that you're going to love as well. You just need to try one. So next time you're at the store, please pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports more in ski, snowboard, and bike than anyone else out there. To find out more about the beer, the athletes, the events, and all things 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. The next big thing for you at that point in time is you make the pilgrimage to Japan with Two Plank Productions. Can you describe your first experience in Japan and why every skier who loves powder needs to check it out?
Oh man, dude. Yeah, I got invited on a film trip to Japan when I was 17, which was crazy. And back then, Japan was not nearly as popular as it is now, or as common as it is now for Americans to go travel there. So it was really like something that you had seen in a couple ski movies at that point, but not many. So when I got that invite, I was just ecstatic. And yeah, the trip was a dream and one of those moments where I got to see the doors that skiing was opening for me. And yeah, all the way back then, skiing Japanese powder is everything it's cracked up to be.
Did you go into the bathhouses with naked men, and was that awkward for you at 17?
Yeah, we went into the onsens. I don't know. I don't remember it being awkward for me. I wonder if it was awkward for any of the other people that I was with that I was 17.
Yeah, that is weird too. And the rest of your season highlights that year, the rest of your highlights are contest related. And thinking back to the contest landscape of that time, who were the big names that you were competing against?
Big names back then, I guess, were when I started out, like I mentioned, it was like Johnny Collinson, Leo Aarons, Sam O'Cohen. Those were the guys from Little Cottonwood. And that was like all the Altabird freeride kids. So those were like the main competition, I'd say. And then our little crew was pretty stacked. My like wingman when we were kids was Ian Borgson. If anybody knows that name, it's because he is one of the most talented skiers I've ever watched ski. And he ended up walking away from the pro skiing route. But if you like Google his run at the Verbier Extreme, he does this huge 3 off the Rhine cliff on his rookie year on the Freeride World Tour. Also in our crew was George Rodney. He went on to win a championship on the Freeride World Tour a couple of years after he got out of the juniors. And then the other kids that I grew up with were Wiley Coppice and Max Coppice. And they were like just as big ascenders as any of us. So we had like our own little crew. And then there were like a couple, like Andrew Pollard was my age. And that's when he came up too. Like he and I started having success right about the same time. And Zach Halverson. It's kind of wild, you look back in hindsight, that we were all competing against each other and that we grew up and we each found our own paths.
Yeah. And that year you go to Palisades and you take second at their event. You win the Ski Yetta event at Taos. And you're on fire. You're having your best season ever, it seems like. And the next stop is the Snowbird stop. And going into Snowbird, you have a chance at the junior freeride title. What happens there?
Oh, man, you're giving my memory a challenge here.
You blew up.
Yeah.
You hurt your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, I think the year before that, I had a chance at the like season title. The year before that, and I just like had a standard fall, just pushed it a little harder than I should have that day, I guess. But then, yeah, I think that year that you're talking about in 2012, that was when I kind of went for broke. I don't think that I was in contention for the tour overall that year.
You were 200 points out. And it was you and some other dude, and if you won the tour, and if he won the tour, is what I was reading about.
Okay.
I've only had like 2 concussions.
I guess it's a good thing that I've like been up to some stuff in my life since then, that like I'm not just like clinging to my memories of what I did when I was 17.
Yeah, that would be kind of sad, I guess.
It'd be like the classic like high school football quarterback, you know?
Yeah, Uncle Rico here.
Yeah.
So you end up graduating high school and you go to the University of Utah. I'm sure that you saw a lot of the terrain in Utah when you were there at Snowbird Comps and you're like, I've got to get to Utah. And you move there. And is college all about exploring terrain in Utah and figuring out what you're going to do with your life classroom-wise?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in a lot of ways, I just didn't know what to do with my life. So I figured it made sense to go to college, somewhere I could ski. So that brought me to the U in Salt Lake. Definitely just like lacking a lot of clarity in my life at that point in time, which I think is pretty fair when you're like 17, turned 18, like after I graduated high school. So I don't think it's fair to like expect kids at that age to have it all figured out. But yeah, ended up in Utah, and I went out there because of the skiing, from seeing it, you know, from like going to those junior freeride comps at Snowbird and free skiing a little bit at Alta with those friends that I had made on the junior comps before. So yeah, that's what drew me out there and started exploring the terrain and was pretty psyched to be skiing that much powder.
Yeah, I mean, the terrain there and the accessibility and the snow, nothing else really compares in the States. And while you're in Utah, I think this is when the biggest change in your life happens.
Actually, Mike, you mind if I share like a little mini story of the chapter right before that? Because I think it's kind of interesting. So like when I was in school, that's when I was having like a lot of that success when I was younger and things were starting to go well. I was competing, still focused on that side. And then I had this big crash. Fortunately, inbounds at Alta, I was hitting a pow jump and I over-rotated a cork 7 and held onto a mute grab a little bit too long. So I like landed a little sideways and like still kind of balled up.
Okay.
And I dislocated my right hip. And then while I was tumbling, I dislocated my right shoulder, broke a few ribs, partially tore my ACL, and broke my sacrum. And that injury totally rocked my world. Like that's the kind of injury that's normally a career ender for anyone in any sport. Normally that only happens to either football players or head-on car crashes. So like that sent me into like a really kind of like strange but formative chapter in my life. And I was rehabbing from that and didn't get back to real skiing for like 2 winters. So like during that time period was when I like got a lot more focused on school and when I started to expand and like look at some other avenues in life. And that's when I started writing a lot. And that was how I like maintained my connection to the sport and to the community of skiing. And a lot of that experience and like while I was writing about skiing, I realized like my motivation was pure to chase this dream of being a professional skier that I had when I was a little kid. And that clarity, when I came back and I got through all that rehab, I got back on skis and started skiing hard. Like that was what gave me the drive to pursue this career.
So you get that drive to get back into going to be a professional skier 100%. And this is the point where a lot of athletes at that time in skiing were starting to do personal projects. And you had created a project in your head. The goal was to ski the highest peak in every state in the American West. How do you come up with the idea and how do you get it funded?
Yeah, it was like pretty early on in the personal project game too. I was still in college. I'm not sure quite what year, how many credits I had left. I guess you'd call it my junior year. It took me 5.5 years to finish school because I was skiing, but only 8 semesters for the record.
Huh.
Yeah, just bouncing around with all that injury and rehab and then taking summer classes and skiing during spring semester and kind of crazy stuff. I used to take 21 credits in the summer so that I could pour my energy into skiing, and credits were cheaper in the summer. So you could get in-state tuition. So anyhow, for the project you're talking about was the film that I created, Ski the Wild West. And I came up with that idea while I was in class, actually. I remember it, to ski the highest peak in every state of the American West. And then I just like started adding one step after the next of like, how am I going to make this happen? And I approached my sponsors at the time about creating this film. And it's maybe not the best business move, but I have used it since, is just being completely honest and saying, look, I don't have experience producing or directing a short film, but I have a lot of friends who have a lot of experience, and I'm not going to hesitate to call them when I have a question. And fortunately, my sponsor at the time, Outdoor Research, believed in me enough to say, yeah, do it. That was kind of the start of like that era of personal projects and getting more into the media side for me.
So this is your big one, and the life-changing part of this movie happens on Mount Hood. And while all of this is documented in the movie and everybody should check it out, can you give us the Cliff Note version of what happened to you?
Yeah. May 10th, 2017, we were climbing and skiing Mount Hood in Oregon. And, long story short, I was transitioning my skis, and it was just that time of day where things were starting to warm up. And it was the first sign or sound of rockfall all day long, and heard the crack, which is a super distinct noise to anybody who's heard rockfall. And I did what you instinctively know how to do from life spent in the mountains, and just kind of like turtle up and huddle over, put your head down. And lo and behold, across an entire mountain, I was just standing in the exact right or wrong place for that rock to fall directly on top of me. It was about the size of a microwave, and it fell off a cliff probably about 40 feet above me and landed on the back of my head. I was wearing a helmet. My helmet definitely saved my life that day. And then it hit me in the middle of my upper back and on my left arm too, because I didn't have time to pull my arm in.
And immediately, this is a dire situation. Like, you can see inside of your arm, and it's like cut through all the layers of your gear. And does panic set in right away, or is it more training and experience just take over?
Yeah, definitely some panic, especially for people who have seen it or people who go watch either of those films after this. It was one of those situations where I didn't know my GoPro was on. Like, I went to turn it off. I actually pushed start recording. And then, months later, I looked at my memory card and it had a 16-minute file on there, and it was the accident. So you can see the accident. Definitely like panic in my voice when I go back and listen to that. But at the same time, like immediately it was very locked in to what needed to be done and how to, just take one step after the next to stay alive and to self-rescue and get off the mountain.
Just the pain level that you're in trying to get off the mountain, because it's something where you've got to ski down to like the Palmer, right? Or that area to get it helied off the mountain. And like It's a dire situation where, like, if you don't get somewhere, you're going to bleed out, right?
Yeah. So like my first worry was bleeding out on the hillside. And so my ski partner wrenched down on my arm with some volet straps to create a tourniquet and cut off blood flow in my left arm to stop the bleeding. And, that was one, a fear of bleeding out on the hillside. And two, doing that meant that we were able to take action really quickly to move. And then the next decision was that we needed a self-rescue because with the warming temperatures, there would be more risk of rockfall. There would be risk of wet slides on either side of the high point we were on. And because of those reasons, not only would we be in danger if we waited there for a rescue, we'd be putting rescuers in really serious danger to come get me. So that made the decision really simple to self-rescue for our safety and for everyone else's. So yeah, locked into what needed to be done. And we had to climb off of that face of the mountain and then ski down the south side of Mount Hood, like you said, down to La Palmer and down to Timberline. Yeah, so we climbed off that face of the mountain. And one of the crazy parts of the story that I don't think I tell often is that rock also hit the toe piece of my binding and broke it. And my ski partner was able to get it to click into my boot, his tech toe, for probably the last time that binding was going to be able to be clicked into, and got it to lock out on my boot, which was huge because we had to ski down through the pearly gates and cross that Borgson and then down the south side.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you got as lucky as one can possibly get in a situation like that. I mean, you could have died, but you didn't. And you go to the hospital, and while you have a long list of injuries, you're going to be fine. But it puts you in a dark place all over again, I would think. Is there any way to describe how dark things get when you realize that you lived through this accident?
At first it was just really confusing and just left me feeling empty and, a lot of wondering how it happened, like why that rock fell at that exact moment in that exact place. Lots of asking those questions. And for a while, it just left me feeling really empty. And then that progressed over months, especially over the summer without skiing there, as a positive force in my life. And I started going into the darkest spaces that I'd ever been mentally in my life. Started getting a lot more depressed, feeling a lot more alone and a lot more isolated. And that was when the suicidal thoughts started getting a lot more frequent and a lot more intense and started getting scary.
I mean, are you drinking through this whole time too to cope with all the thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely turned to alcohol quite a bit. And I think that at that point in time, I was like still justifying it as like I'm partying and having fun with my friends, but was definitely trying to drink a lot every single chance that I had to drink. So that was definitely a big thing that I turned to. And like my whole life, I like never really enjoyed smoking weed. I didn't really like how it made me feel. But at that point in time, I started smoking a lot more, trying to numb away what I was feeling. In hindsight, it's pretty obvious. But yeah, drinking was really the tool that I was using a lot at that point in time.
So when do you realize, and I don't know if it's a realization or someone helps you or whatever, but you're going to tell me this, but it kind of gets to the point where you have two choices in life, I would think. Either you get help or you kill yourself, because the mental pain that you're dealing with, it only keeps getting worse and worse by the year, it seems like, or at least as you get older and you have these injuries. And you're this badass in the mountains who needs nothing for the most part. Is that what makes it so hard to ask for help? Is because with everything else in life, you can do it all yourself? And this thing is something you can't solve?
Yeah, it was definitely kind of the dichotomy that I was living through at that point in time. So, that happened in May 2017. Through the summer was when things started to get darker. That summer and then that fall was my last semester in college, and I was just drinking and partying nonstop at that point in time. And that was also the winter that I signed with Solomon. So like outwardly, I was getting a lot of external validation. I also like made that film and I was getting a lot of recognition for that. And a lot of people at that point in time wanted to be my friend, but I didn't really feel like I could tell any of them what was actually happening in my life. And during that winter, I was able to use skiing as a tool to keep going and to keep some positive energy in my life as a distraction or another way to numb the pain that I was feeling mentally and emotionally. And then that ski season ended with I had bad and then recurrent dislocations of both shoulders. So that ended my season. And then simultaneously, a friend had a really bad accident in the mountains and he went into a coma, and then he would eventually pass away. And a lot of other things were stacking up in my life that were really, really difficult to deal with when I was already really depressed and when I was already suicidal. Went into back-to-back bilateral shoulder surgeries. My parents' house almost burnt down in a wildfire the same week that my friend died.
You can't catch a break.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point in time, like, that was when I was still wondering a lot of the why behind this. And it just seemed like disaster was following me. My friend who died, I was supposed to be there with him that day. And then there was another friend who, my plans changed a little bit. And then the morning we were supposed to ski together, he got in an avalanche. And it just felt like I was the problem. I don't know what it was, but at that point in time, I was convinced that death just had it out for me, and I just kept cheating it somehow. And so that was a crazy string of events. And then in August of 2018, after rehabbing from those shoulder surgeries just enough to be allowed to run again, I was trail running, I tripped and fell, and I broke my collarbone, which is a really lame way to break a bone. But also in that fall, I sustained a minor concussion. And the reason that now I can see in hindsight that it was a minor concussion was that I had a loss of emotional control, which is one of the symptoms of concussions that's not often talked about, but I think is really important that we clue into a lot more. So that day when I broke my collarbone, it was my literal and metaphorical breaking point. And that was when I was at that point in my life where, exactly like you say, I was in a spot where I had two options. I either had to ask for help or I was going to kill myself. And I don't know how long I would have made it, but fortunately that concussion let my emotional guard down. And that was when I finally followed through on asking for help for the first time. And I asked my brother and my mom to hold me accountable to finding a therapist for the first time. And yeah, it's a pretty wild string of events to bring me there. But that was my rock bottom. And I'm really glad that, I made that choice to get help.
Yeah, I would think that there is so much for you to unpack when you get to therapy, that problems, they're not going to be solved right away. I mean, it's years of stuff that you have to deal with to figure out and break them down. But do you finally feel comfort in the fact that you're working with someone? Is it a relief almost?
Yeah, definitely a relief. My first day with my therapist, she asked me if I was having suicidal thoughts, and that was the first time that I opened up, and I never told anybody in my whole life. Man, that was a really big moment, and yeah, definitely a really big relief. I'd spent my entire life feeling so alone, largely because of these thoughts that I was hiding, and certainly for the year prior to that, I was feeling really lonely for that reason. And, just by being able to share that with somebody, I wasn't alone anymore. And at the time, it was pretty clear that the highest on the list of problems and the most addressable and the most obvious was PTSD. And yeah, I got the help that I needed.
That's something that you're still doing today, right? I would think that therapy is something that's just in for the long run.
Yeah, totally. I continue to talk therapy routinely in my life now. I've totally processed the PTSD. I don't experience any recurring symptoms or fallout from, the Mount Hood accident. I'm totally in a good place with that now. And talk therapy for me now is unpacking some of the deeper formative memories for me and just learning how to live a little bit better and keep growing in a way that I'm able to better manage my bipolar disorder. And, I always say too, that therapy is just a structured way for anyone to figure out how to live their life better. So you don't have to have a diagnosable mental illness to benefit from it in any way.
No, I think anytime anybody has issues, if you can talk through it with someone, it's going to help you so much. If you're going to sit there and keep it bottled up inside, it's just going to keep building and building and building. and then that pressure eventually is going to explode. So it's nice that you finally have someone to talk to, although that pressure has probably exploded like 10 different times throughout your life because you had so much shit going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I sure did have a lot of shit going on.
And now, the beauty of what you're doing is it seems like you're picking up a lot more public speaking gigs. And I would think that it's not only helpful for you, but I'm sure it is helpful for you to talk to anybody. Just to be able to get these things off your chest has to feel good. But it's also got to feel good knowing that there's a lot of other people that haven't had the confidence to go get help yet. And you're able to talk to them. They can hear your story and you're going to help change things for people. Is that why you're doing these speaking things?
Man, Mike, I am still struggling to figure out the words to do justice to the meaning that I'm finding in life right now. You know, a lot of what you're talking to right now for the listeners is that I've started sharing openly about my story publicly, you know, really just over the past year and change. And the number of people that has reached has been amazing. But the impact that it's had on those people is what means the most out of anything I've ever done in my entire life. And I've received thousands of messages from people that all say something to the degree of thank you. I feel less alone now. And that really does mean the world to me every single time. And I received a lot of messages from people saying, like, this helped me understand why I lost my brother to suicide. I feel like I understand him more now. And moments and messages like that mean a lot. And now, yeah, like the work that I'm focused on right now is growing into public speaking. And it's super cool to get to connect with people in person. I'm so grateful for every single opportunity because the reason that I'm doing all of this is that if I could have heard my story when I was living it, then it would have been a path to survival.
Yeah.
It would have charted my journey. And so that's the opportunity and the resource that I'm now able to provide for other people.
Well, that's pretty awesome, man, and very selfless of you. And I don't know where to go from there other than to inappropriate questions to lighten the mood a little bit. And to go to inappropriate questions, I had to find someone that you knew pretty well. And I decided to go with a guy that you hung out with a lot, I think, in Utah, but you live with in Truckee, California these days. I'm talking about Big Air Todd Laguerre. And Todd came up with 3 inappropriate questions. Todd's also been on the podcast, so anybody who wants to hear Todd's interview, they can hear it. But I'm going to cue up question number 1 from Todd right now.
Hey, Drew. It seems like you've been wearing some awfully short shorts recently. Is it true that you're pushing the boundaries on the hem front?
No, I run in 5-inch inseams, which the ski community seems to think is really short, but the running world thinks that that's like pretty medium length. I think the shorts that Todd is referencing are actually 7-inch inseams, which is just like normal shorts. I don't know, man. The ski world just isn't ready for how much thigh I like showing all summer.
All right. Well, we will continue to see your thighs and hopefully your shorts keep getting shorter. I'm going to go with question number 2.
I'm kind of curious, with all your time doing long missions, running, and of course skiing as well, especially for someone who has the highest pancake intake of anyone I've ever met. If you had a scenario on the trail where you've encountered needing to deal with, I don't know, maybe an unfortunate bathroom break, or what's the worst story you have from an unfortunate moment on long missions?
So I think he's asking if you've ever shit your pants running.
No, I've never shit my pants because I'm a trail runner, so I just shit in the woods.
Okay. What's the biggest emergency you've had?
I'd say on the ski side, the greatest poop I've ever had was when Adam Clark and I were skiing Gannett Peak in Wyoming. It was a 50-mile round trip to go ski that. And on our summit day, it was like right after sunrise, and just had to, take a poop on the glacier in the middle of June. This is probably the best one on the ski side. And then on the running side, they sneak up like way quicker on the running side.
Just because you're dripping sweat and it just got to happen right then?
Yeah, exactly, man. So you start to get really good at like picking out the right leaves, or mushrooms are actually really good toilet paper.
Huh. All right. So you wipe your ass with mushrooms. I eat them, but whatever.
I love, too, that Todd's questions are like mostly focused on the running side, because we haven't even hit on running this whole interview.
We talked about it for a split second in the beginning. I think we mentioned the Leadville 100 and a runner's high, and I had more about that in the end, but you know what? It's not a running podcast. I'm not going to talk about running anymore. But I am going to go to your last question, and here we go.
True or false? older single women, sometimes called cougars, have a strong attraction to you?
Oh man, I knew that the inappropriate questions would eventually get to something with some weight and consequence. So well played, Todd. Yeah, definitely had a thing for older women. I have a partner who is my same age now, but she'll still get a laugh out of hearing this. But what Todd's referencing is we were at this like party in Jackson, and this cougar was trying to take me home. And my memories are a little blurry because that was when I was drinking a lot. But I ended up like not going home with her and like going to another bar or something. And then she like freaked out and was like upset that I left. And like Todd and Amy were like the people there that she like vented to, I guess, and like went about like trying to seduce like some other young man. So that's the story that Todd probably wanted to get out of me there.
All right, well, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And Drew, it is so awesome that you're at a point where you can talk openly about everything that's gone on in your life. But what's more impressive is how you own this shit. I mean, I respect the hell out of you for not only having lived through all the stuff that you've lived through, but more so for the sharing with the world, because where your story is really going to impact people is right there with you public speaking and your movie. So it's amazing that you're able to do that and put that out to the world and have the confidence to do that. It's also incredible to see the career that you carved out for yourself over the past 15 years, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to have these conversations, and yeah, let's go skiing.
So that was time with Drew Peterson, and it's so sad to me that Drew was struggling to the point of suicidal thoughts at age 9. Next time you see a 9-year-old kid, think about that. It's way too young to be struggling, and at that age, it's not like you know how to ask for help. And with Drew, while his major accident was terrible, it could have also been the best thing that ever happened to him. I mean, it was the catalyst for a lot of darkness and ultimately help. At the end of the day, mental illness is a real thing and way more common than we think. There used to be a stigma around it, but not anymore. If you are hurting, know that you're not alone and don't be afraid to seek out help, because if you don't, things aren't going to miraculously fix themselves. It shouldn't take a major injury or life event for you to realize that you aren't well. While that's how it happened with Drew, there are better ways to manage thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And please get the help you need to make your life more manageable. That's the podcast. Now it's time for the review of the week, and it's a 5-star review that comes from WiseGuy888. The review is titled Love the Hatchup Interview, and here it goes. Just finished listening to the Mike Hatchup interview from 2016. Wow, that was a long time ago. Really enjoyed it. I skied with Mike and the other guys from the Goon Squad when they spent the winter at Palisades, Tahoe. In fact, I competed against Mike in a King of the Hill event at Palisades that year. It was around 1982. He got first, I got third. I almost beat him in the first run, but we both fell and had to do another run. By then, I was pretty hammered, and Hatchup kicked my butt. Anyways, I doubt Hatchup even remembers that day, but I sure do. Anyways, thanks to you, the Powell Movement, for spotlighting the legends of the action sports world. Excellent job. You're the man. Larry Lapkin, Tahoe City, California. Well, thank you very much, Larry, for that review. Sounds like you had an amazing younger life, and I hope your life is still amazing, but it was cool that you were able to hang with Patrick and the Goon Squad, and I'm sure there were some wild times back then. I appreciate that review. Please email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com with your address, and I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. I only have a few of these left, so if you want one, please submit a review or post about how great you think the show is on social media and tag me so I see it. If I read it on the show, you'll get a beanie too. Finally, I want to thank you for listening and ask you to support my amazing sponsors. I only work with the best, and they are Outdoor Research, GoPro, Stanley, Elon Skis, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Have a great week, everyone.